This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeff Malinoff, and boy, oh boy, we've had an interesting last 24 hours in the world of sports, most notably Antonio Brown's trade question mark that never was, but, I mean, did it happen? Okay, well, first things first, we'll talk about the Antonio Brown trade to Buffalo that never happened, but almost did. We'll talk about an actual trade that did happen between Washington and Denver. And we'll also talk about the NBA as well as LeBron and his the rest of the season, how he's going to do in LA. The classic OKC versus Portland game. And other things that need to be talked about, we will. But first thing is first. It was reported around, 2:30 in the afternoon yesterday, that Antonio Brown, or the Steelers, however, were in the midst of dealing him to Buffalo, Antonio Brown to Buffalo. Now, I have been looking to see what the actual trade was going to be, but I have found nothing. I believe it was undisclosed what the actual trade was going to be. I'm assuming it was going to be multiple picks. I'm assuming there was going to be a first-round pick in there. This is all guessing, of course, but of course, Antonio Brown said his piece on social media, on Instagram, actually, and the NFL reported that he was going to Buffalo, and then he replied, fake news, put a little Donald Trump into him, and people really went along with it, definitely, got super interested in it, see what the actual situation was, because honestly, people had no idea. People had no idea what was true and what was fake. So, with that being said, there's a lot of unanswered questions right now. Obviously, Antonio Brown was one of the key reasons this trade died. And what the reason, it seemed to me that Antonio Brown was very vocal about not playing in Buffalo. He obviously wanted to not play in a bigger market, and obviously Buffalo is the lowest of low markets in the NFL. I mean, they're like the Sacramento Kings of the NFL. They cannot sustain, they can't, what's the word I'm looking for? They can't advertise, or they can't lure superstars into their lineups, into their teams, because of their poor market. I mean, they have the money because of salary cap and all that stuff, but I think of it more along the lines of just do you really want to live in Buffalo? So with that being said, obviously, the Bills heard what Antonio Brown thought, and he was thinking more along the lines of why would we want a guy who doesn't want to play here? And he's vocal about it. And if he's going to continue to be vocal about it, that's just going to bring more and more people PO'd about in the organization and the fan base in Buffalo, how they would react to him. And with that being said, obviously I think the Bills made the right decision. They said they're no longer invested in acquiring Antonio Brown, so they're going to look at free agency. But, especially when a guy is vocal about not wanting to play for you, why would you want him? Like, you're not going to say tough, you know what? And it just feels like it would have been a bad marriage, you know what I mean, between Antonio Brown and, just if he was having trouble in Pittsburgh, imagine the trouble he would have put in Buffalo. This just wouldn't have ended well at all. And, I mean, when you think about it, let's look into how he would actually fit in the offense. I mean, Josh Allen is still a rookie quarterback. He had some flashes last season. There is some positives there, no question about it. But would Josh Allen be able to handle the criticisms that Antonio Brown would probably have on him, right? I mean, he would eat him up. He would tear him to shreds, and maybe he's not mentally ready for that. So it's probably best if he doesn't go to Buffalo. If he was meant to go really anywhere, it was going to be a bigger market with maybe not just the market, but also maybe not a rookie quarterback or a one-year quarterback. I think he needs someone that is somewhat established, not obviously I just think somebody I don't know. It's hard to say what he's best fit for, but maybe a place he wants to be rather than a place that he's forced to be. I'm not sure if he has anything in his contract. I'm pretty sure there's actually nothing in his contract that says he can veto trade anything. I think it was just his, I don't want to say pouting, but his just desire not to play there is a serious factor. It's just a whole weird scenario how this is all going down. I mean, when I first saw the how it was going down, what the trade was, I looked at it and went, what? I verbally, audibly went, what? I was not with anybody. I was chilling. It was after I finished work here. I was home. I was pretty exhausted. It was about 8.5 hours, basically, a day, including getting up at 4:30 a.m. to come here. And what happened was, I looked at it and I went, just what the heck just happened? Gosh, I was just in a complete awe. That was the last team, honestly. If I had to rank teams of who would be most likely to grab Antonio Brown, the Bills would be number 30, 31, or 32. They were on they were so far off the radar that, it was just not, it wasn't even the same stratosphere how far off that I believed they were going to have a chance. This just seemed impossible. Well, it is impossible now because Antonio Brown said, you know what, I'm not playing in Buffalo. Can't say Well, due to his popularity and his lifestyle, he loves the spotlight. He loves the attractions. He loves the celebrity interactions and all that stuff. And, I mean, I think we all would as well, don't get me wrong. But for his personality type, he obviously didn't want to go to Buffalo because there's really nothing to do in Buffalo. If you have, there's actually this infamous interview with Marshawn Lynch I remember hearing about when he was with Buffalo, because he was actually, a lot of people don't remember, he was actually drafted by Buffalo. But regardless, he was being interviewed, and I forget where he was in. It was, I think, on local radio or something like that. I don't really remember. It's such a long time ago. But I remember clearly someone asking him, what's your favorite part about Buffalo? As in saying, oh, the city, the fans, or something. And then Marshawn Lynch answers, Applebee's. He says Applebee's as his favorite part of Buffalo, even though it's a chain and it's everywhere. But I think it's personally pretty good. I think that perfectly fits how the how the area of Buffalo is all about. There's a hardcore fan base. Don't get me wrong, I love their fan base. I love the diehard fans there, and they have a lot of love over there. But when it came down to the ambiance and what's the word I'm looking for? The limelight, I guess, the attractions there's really not much to go on. I think people in Buffalo would even say that as well. But just to see Antonio Brown, like I saw some people photoshopping him in a Bills jersey. It just seemed so off, It just didn't seem. It didn't seem right. It just seemed not what's supposed to be. I guess that makes sense. But in a way, it's almost along the lines of like, what would have happened if he did get traded there and he had no say and he had to go to, would he even go there? Would he sit out? Like, would he pull Le'Veon Bell and say, you know what, I'm not going to play for you, one down, so trade me or else? Like, I could easily see that happening in the long run if that trade actually did go down. And honestly, I think the Bills did the right thing by backing out on that and saying, you know what, we're not even going to risk this. So, with that being said, I think it's more along the lines of the Bills dodged a bullet rather than the Steelers going, well, great, what do we do now? Because I think it's kind of clear that they don't have any options left. And with that being said, like, who are the options that are left, really? Like, when you think about it, like, of course, like, with the whole 49ers thing, that's also an option, I'm assuming. But they're also in talks with Odell Beckham Jr., so that might not be the case. I only say the 49ers because that Photoshop of him when he posted on Instagram of him in a 49ers jersey, that's the only reason I bring that up. I mean, I really don't know where else like he could really go. The Oakland Raiders obviously are an option. I don't think he would. I think California would be a good place for him. I mean, I don't think the LA like if I'm thinking of like any major spot he would love to go to, LA would probably be one, but I don't see that happening. There's no possible reason they would trade for him. Both LA teams are fine the way they are. And then there's also, I guess, Miami and in the Florida area, possibly Miami, but that doesn't stay. They're in a rebuild period, so that wouldn't work out. If we look at Tampa Bay, I guess that's a smart possibility. I mean, the Buccaneers would have to give up multiple first-round picks, I feel like, in order to even be considered one of the options. And then you also have Jacksonville, but I think they'll have to get rid of like a Jalen Ramsey type in exchange. And there's just too much at stake there to get rid of your best corner and arguably the best in the league. So I'm just looking at the major hotspots, basically, when it comes down to trading for Antonio Brown, and he would be like, yes, I'm all for it. But, I mean, does he just want to be in a higher marker? Does he want to be on a winning team? I mean, I really don't know what his actual idea is or what his ideal place is, because I don't think he really has, well, obviously he does care where he goes to, but it's more along the lines of like, as long as it's a good team and we're going to be like on national television a lot, that's all that matters. And I think he knew if he went to the Bills, they are not on really national television a lot. So that makes sense. If he doesn't really want to go there, it's not good in his interest. Probably his agents probably feels the same way, and is just, if he has a publicist, I'm not sure. I don't really follow that much about his personal adventures like that, but it's one of those things where you're looking at it and going, this is probably the worst spot for him, because he's not a guy that says, I'll play for anyone. He's like, I'll play for someone that best suits me and best suits my market and best suits my ideas, I guess you can say. There's just a lot of different options when it comes down to what Antonio Brown wants and what he can get. And obviously, it sounds like with this trade not going down, and the Steelers or I guess the Bills not saying like, you know what, the Bills probably are the ones that are the ones that chose to back out, and the Steelers were trying to get them to stay in a way, because it's like there's no veto trade. And I don't think there's not been any news, or I haven't really checked the contract or anything in like detail, but I'm assuming there's absolutely nothing he can do if they actually agree to that trade, unless he can sit out like Le'Veon Bell did. So I think it's more along the lines of like, Bills heard what he was saying on social media, and like he sounded like he really didn't want to play for them, so why even bother trying to get a guy and risking draft picks or such to get a guy that's not really going to play for you. So it's a smart decision on their part to move on from that, the Bills, I mean. But now the Steelers are kind of stuck, because social media is really going to screw them over in the long run, because it's like, if they try to give him to, I know like Arizona and the Jets were out of it, but let's just say Arizona was the best front runner right now, and they were giving the Steelers the best offer, and Antonio Brown read it on the rumor mill, because it would have obviously been leaked, because everything would have been leaked, and it would have been one of those things where you're looking at it and go, and like, if you're part of the Arizona organization, you're like, well, I don't want this guy if he keeps complaining about this kind of stuff. So, it just doesn't work in the long run when you're thinking about potential spots where he can voice his disapproval on social media and that team can see it, and then they're going like, well, why do we want him if he doesn't want to come here? Like, if he let's just say this. Let's say he, like, on Instagram posted pictures of himself in different jerseys, and those teams would go for him. Those teams would push for him, in theory. This is just a theory, of course. I know he already did with the 49ers, but let's just say he did it like he said, these are the teams I want to play for, and just posted pictures or posted names of all the teams he wants to play for. Or is willing to play for, I guess. The keyword willing. And then those teams are going to be the ones that are going to be looking for the trade, but I think it's going to be on the lines of, like, what are they going to give up? Because they're really not going to give up any first-round picks if they know he wants to play for them and he won't play for other certain teams. And it just seems it's all in the favor of Antonio Brown in this situation, since he has, in theory, the right to say no because of social media. So with that being said, who knows what's actually going to go down, if this is actually going to, how do I say this? This is actually going to affect the rest of this trade, because it's supposed to happen today. Everything's supposed to really happen today, supposedly, that is. The trade's supposed to happen by today. And with that being said, is there going to be a more disapproval idea of Antonio Brown posting on social media saying, I don't want to play with these guys that are going to be looking for a trade? Like, let's say I don't know, what team is like Buffalo? I can't really imagine a team quite like Buffalo. That's kind of that circumstance. Yeah, geez, poor Buffalo, man. You can't really think of anything else worse destinations than Buffalo. In the market wise, I mean, maybe Oakland, but they are so well known and universally known that it's not that bad, all things considered, because they're just popular. That's just the thing. Like, you see people. I've seen people wear Raiders gear in in Europe and in Asia and all that stuff. But I think some of it, they're still thinking they're in LA, so I guess that's also one of those things. But regardless, I think when you're looking at it, Antonio Brown just said, I'm not playing for Buffalo. They're a team going nowhere. Maybe they're not. Hopefully they can prove them wrong. But it's one of those things where you're looking at it and going, that's a big, what's the word I'm looking for? That's a big question mark in where Antonio Brown's future is going to lie. But again, we'll see how everything turns out. This could mean that he's going to be traded to the team he really wants to play for, rather than just a random team that gets traded, because it would have been Buffalo by now. So we'll see how everything turns out. Hopefully we'll have breaking news during this podcast or the football podcast as this is going on. But we'll take a short break, and when we get back, we'll actually have a trade that actually did happen between Washington and Denver, and we'll get right on that when we return.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We just finished talking about the Antonio Brown trade that never was, I guess you can say. Now, let's talk about a trade that actually did happen between Washington and Denver. As you know, with the whole Joe Flacco trade for Denver, Washington was one of those teams that actually some people thought they would be going, Baltimore would be trading with to get Flacco. But now, with the Broncos having two quarterbacks, with one with a kind of large contract and one with a really large contract in Flacco, their now backup, former starter now, Case Keenum, has been traded to the Washington Redskins. So the official trade is Case Keenum and a 7th-round pick in exchange for a 6th-round pick. So pennies on the dollar, basically, for Case Keenum. And Washington now has its quarterback for the foreseeable future in Case Keenum. Again, he's this huge commodity coming off his 13-3 season with the Minnesota Vikings, as well as the Minneapolis Miracle with that pass to Stephon Diggs, where the safety for the Saints tried to hit the hit stick way too hard and even hit his own player, causing Diggs to run to the end zone, no time on the clock, taking them to the NFC title game. And then in Philadelphia, it wasn't in Philadelphia, was it? It was in Minnesota. Or was it in Philadelphia? No, Philadelphia had the first seed. No, Philadelphia had the first seed, and it just went downhill from there, and they got destroyed in Philadelphia, and it was just a bad time for everybody in Minnesota, that is. And then they got Kirk Cousins, the Vikings did, hoping that would be an upgrade, and they didn't even make the playoffs. So maybe they should have kept Case Keenum in theory, maybe like the big what-if scenario, you know? But again, I could be totally wrong on the matter, and they could have been the same, maybe a worse record. But with that being said, I think it's more along the lines of, they lost 38-7. So I meant the NFC Championship game where Philadelphia won and beat the Vikings. But regardless, moving on from that, the trade, Case Keenum now goes from them to to Denver, and now to Washington. Miami, where did Miami come from? Oh, he's probably going to retire in Miami. But regardless, it's going to be one of those things where you're looking at it and going, was this just a one-year fluke? Case Keenum needs to prove this season with the Washington Redskins, that one season with Minnesota, that 13-3 season, was not a fluke. Because if it was a fluke, then this whole thing is not pointless, but it'll be a waste of a trade in theory. No, because you're looking at it and going, well, he had one good season. He's been kind of questionable for his majority of his career. So, it's just interesting to say the least, just how one season can turn a whole guy's career down, and then it could go back to where it was before. So, with that being said, this trade went down yesterday. So, we had a fake trade, a broken down trade, I guess you could say, and a real trade. So, that's good in all aspects. But with that being said, continuing on from this, how is this going to... Is this a good thing for Redskins, or who's getting the better deal here? Who's trading for the better quarterback? Are the Broncos trading better because they keep Joe Flacco and lose Case Keenum, or is it the other way around and where the Washington Redskins might end up with the better deal in the long run? So to me, this goes down to whoever. I guess we're going to have a clear winner and loser by this season. How the Broncos will do, and how the Ravens will do, and how the Redskins will do, because all three of these teams are affected by these two trades. Obviously, Joe Flacco leaving the Ravens and Lamar Jackson being officially their quarterback is that affection for them. Obviously, Flacco in exchange for Keenum is that, and then of course Washington gets, I guess, what is it, the sloppy seconds of Case Keenum. I'm not sure how else do you put it, but it's going to be it's all going to be an interesting factor in where how all this is going to go down and how each team's going to do. So if I had to make a guess right off the bat of who's going to be better off in the long run, it might be, I think it might be the Redskins, and I'll tell you why. The Redskins with Alex Smith last season were looking to be winners of the NFC East. And then he unfortunately broke his leg. And then Colt McCoy broke his leg. And then they were stuck with Mark Sanchez. So there's just bad luck happened with the Redskins where they could have totally won their division. That could have totally happened. And with that being said, why can't Case Keenum be the same type of quarterback Alex Smith was? They kind of had the same style of quarterback play, and I think maybe with the right offense and like how Adrian Peterson was playing with the Redskins last season, he kind of had a revitalized career. They have still some solid players on the offensive side. They have they have an okay defense, but honestly, to me, the NFC East is still pretty weak. Yeah, the Cowboys won the division last year, and they looked pretty good at the end of the season. They still have Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper. That whole that trio kind of helped them get into the playoffs. But who's to say that that's going to be the same for this season? And who's going to say that the Redskins can't come back and still play at a level they were at the beginning of last season? People forgot they were a pretty good team at the beginning of the last season. I mean, if you look at it, like let's look at their record, if we look at the 2018 Redskins season, at the beginning, they looked extremely good. They looked obviously not like championship contenders to me, but they looked like a solid team. They looked like just an overall good, solid team. Yeah, they ended 7-9, but let's just look at the regular season. At one point, they were, after week 8, they only had 2 losses. So they were 6-2. They beat Arizona the first week, then they lost to Indianapolis, then they beat Green Bay, lost to New Orleans, then beat Carolina, beat Dallas, and beat New York. And then I forget when Alex Smith broke his leg. What game? I'm trying to remember what game he broke his leg on. It's really upsetting to see that. Like, if you actually watch that again, it's really disturbing, and it's still a Joe Theismann kind of gruesome injury that you never want to see anyone have happen. It was week 11 against the Texans. That's right. That's when that happened. And so at week 11, they only lost 3 games going into that game. So they were 8-3. Or I'm sorry, that's incorrect. They were 6-3 going into that game against Houston. And then the injury happened. And they only won 1 game after that. They beat Jacksonville in week 15. So let's just look. Like, they played the Texans, they lost. Alex Smith got injured. Maybe he could have helped them win that game still, because they only lost by 2 points. Then they lost to Dallas, and then Philadelphia, and then New York 3 times. Throughout those 4 straight games they lost, 3 of them were against NFC East teams. And how they just beat them at the beginning of the season. Like, they beat Dallas, they beat the Giants. They lost to Philadelphia twice, but because the first game was against week 13 against the Eagles, Alex Smith never had an opportunity to play them, so we don't know what the outcome would actually been with Alex Smith being the quarterback. Because he was having a pretty decent season. And with that being said, going into all that, you're looking more along the lines of all these what-if scenarios with the Redskins. But now with Case Keenum, who I'm not going to say is the same caliber as Alex Smith, but he's had that season of brilliance like Alex Smith had with the 49ers that 1 year in 2011 when they went 13-3. So it's not like they're getting a scrub. Case Keenum has proven he can play, but I guess it depends on was that 1 year a fluke or not. And this is all going to be proven next season, how the Redskins start off and end. And just hope for the recovery of Alex Smith, obviously, and how he's been doing. And hopefully nothing happens like that ever again. But regardless, the Redskins have Case Keenum, the Broncos have Joe Flacco, and now the Ravens are staying with their guy Lamar Jackson for the foreseeable future. So we're going to take another short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the NBA a little bit and LeBron's future for the rest of the season. And we'll see how all that goes, and we'll be right on that when we return.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Just finished talking about the trade that happened and the trade that didn't happen. Now let's go on the NBA. LeBron has talked with with the LA Lakers, and it seems like they're in a mutual agreement that he is going to have limited minutes, and they're going to put him on minutes restrictions, and it could go to possibility of back-to-back games where he doesn't even play, which kind of really contradicts what he said before about not missing any games unless he was hurt. So I'm not entirely sure what the actual reasoning is. Maybe he realizes that that this team is not making the playoffs by a long shot. And it's just one of those things you're looking at it and going well, that kind of sums up this season. The restriction of minutes for LeBron James. And if this is the end of the season for LeBron, which it sounds like it's about to be, is this his worst season in the NBA? Maybe not statistically wise. Maybe that's another year, of course. He's had some positive double-double games and has come up in situations where he's impressive. But overall, it just looks like this season as just on a team he's on in a way is his most disappointing. He just could not win. They can't win games. And they're so far behind. Well, far behind is a strong word, but they have I believe less than 1% chance of making the playoffs now. So instead of attempting to do that, are they going to try to go after Zion? Are they going to try to do that, the tank for Zion, like 90% of the other teams are going to be doing, basically? And so with that, you're looking along the lines of, what's this going to mean for the future of the Lakers? Because he only has 3 years left on his contract. He signed a 4-year max. And I just don't know what the future holds. Maybe that's a strong term. Maybe that's too strong. But I'm saying that, was this, in theory, when you first saw the signing for the Lakers, like, okay, immediate contenders, because that's just what LeBron's done. He's done so much with so little talent in the past, and he's done so much with so much talent in the past. He's done even more with so much talent in the past that it seems to me that this would be only a benefit to them, because not only can the Lakers improve with their young core, which is a very talented core, they also can add guys to there because of how big their market is and how big their checkbook is. So with that being said, I think it's coming on in the terms of, now you're looking at it going, maybe we looked at this the wrong way. Did we look at this too one-dimensionally, in a sense? And what I mean by one-dimensionally is like just on paper how this team looked. Young core with LeBron equals championship in a lot of people's minds. And I was one of those guys too that was like, oh, this team has a shot to make some noise. I wouldn't say championship win, but a thorn in the Warriors' side in theory, because of the fact like LeBron's just, he's done a lot in his career, obviously, and he's always been a contender. And so adding him to the Lakers can only make them contenders, right? That was everyone's theory. And I think everyone agreed with that sense. So with that being, so adding on to that, you're also looking along the terms of, you're looking along the terms of just like how the rest is going to go down. And are they just going to build around LeBron still? Are they going to, well, obviously they're going to build around LeBron still, but it's going to be along the terms of, how is LeBron going to react to this disappointing season? Because I don't think since his career start, I don't think he's ever had a season this disappointing. Maybe being swept in the 2007 finals, maybe losing the finals multiple years against the Warriors, I'm not sure. But not even making the playoffs, and maybe realizing that the West is a lot harder to win than normal. And I don't know, it just feels to me that there's something missing here in the Lakers locker room. Maybe because they were third in the West for a good period of time and right behind for a second. They were looking pretty good, honestly, at the beginning of the season. People were like, oh yeah, LeBron's still playing at the best of his ability. Then he gets injured, and then it goes downhill from there. And you can also say that him wanting Anthony Davis kind of put a thorn in between him and his teammates in LA, and that's understandable. And then you can also think of, like, as soon as he came back, Kuzma and Ingram were playing well. They're scoring points, and Ball was also out, which is also a factor. And it's just one of those things you're looking at and going, like, they're not playing together. They're not playing through LeBron, and teams have won championships in LeBron's career have played through him. And now you're looking at the Lakers, and it's kind of like, I don't want to say in a selfish mindset for multiple players, especially like Kuzma and Ingram, but I think they're just used to playing. They're used to playing. I remember talking about this with someone, that they're used to playing in a sense of they were the focal point in the offensive side. They were the focal point in the scoring. Now with LeBron there, they are not, and they went back to their old ways when he was gone, when he was injured. Now he's back, and they're not playing through him anymore. And maybe if they play through him, they can make the playoffs next year. But it seems to me that they're giving up on this season. It seems like this season's just about over for the Lakers. And I actually was reading something on, I think it was Instagram or Twitter or something. I forget where it was. But it was like a Lakers fan, I think, sent a letter to the Lakers or email or something like, maybe it was a tweet or something. But anyway, just people caught their eye on it. It's like, we've been doing this for 7 years. We've had enough. We've waited long enough. 7 years of this nonsense. And I'm like, and then I read a comment on his post, like someone posts, I think it was like the NBA Instagram posted this about like, oh, the Laker fans are getting fed up with all this, and then you see like fans saying, and then people on Instagram reporting like, or sending messages more along the lines of like, dude, 7 years is nothing compared to like 90% of the teams I've been through. I mean, it's been nothing but Spurs and Heat and Lakers and Warriors and Cavaliers these last 2 decades. And like from 2000 to 2019, you can count the number of champions on one finger. Let's do it. Cavs, Warriors, Heat, Mavericks, Spurs. Yeah. I'm sorry. You can add the Pistons. I'm sorry. You can do 6 teams that won a championship in the last 20 years. If I missed one, I'm sorry. But the fact that the 5 main ones, and then you just add another one for 1 year that the Pistons won a championship was different. And I added the Mavericks, right? Let's see. Cavs, Mavericks, Warriors, Spurs, Heat. And then you add the Pistons. So, yes. Those are the only 6 teams that have won a championship in the last 20 years. That has to be, right? Yeah. Yeah, because, how unbelievable is that? And so Laker fans are complaining like, oh, we've waited 7 years of mediocrity. I'm like, you guys, oh, cry me a river. Like, of all the things you guys have gone through, you've gone championship success for the last 500 years. 7 years is nothing. I mean, look at the Cleveland Browns, for example. My good Lord. If we're just looking at NBA teams, look at Seattle. Like, they had a team and that crumbled. Look at the Sacramento Kings. I mean, that just speaks for itself of bad luck they've been through for decades and mediocrity and not even below mediocrity. And, I mean, there's been so many other teams with just the worst luck, or the worst situations possible. So, Laker fans, I say you cannot complain about anything. It's like if the Warriors in 2 years lose, like everybody, and they have all this bad luck, and they're going like, come on, enough is enough after 2 years, and then we're like, no one's going to have sympathy for you. It's a lot like the Lakers having, like, the Laker fans are going to get no sympathy, because one thing's for sure. They're going to be just like when the Patriots lose, like when Brady's gone and Belichick's gone and all that coaching staff is probably going to be gone elsewhere, and they are basically done with that dynasty, because all dynasties end. I'm not going to be like Rob Parker and say it's ending right now. I'm saying, when Brady and Belichick are gone, I don't see this team really being that successful anymore. They might be able to rekindle some magic as soon as they're gone, but not continue on to that success. And so when that happens, it's going to be more along the lines of Patriot fans are going to get no sympathy. You've had 20 years of success. It's time to move on. You cannot cry in your pillow thinking, why can't we catch a break? You've caught a break for 20 years, Same thing with the Lakers. You've caught a break for 30 years. You've had the run in the 80s. You had the run in the 70s. You had the run in the 2000s. You had a three-peat in 2000 2002. You had a back-to-back in 09 and 10. You had Kobe Bryant, arguably one of the greatest players of all time. You've had Shaquille O'Neal with him in one of the dominant duos of all time. There's no sympathy here because you guys have had run loads of success. So that's just my... Oh, yeah, by the way, the 4 best scorers of all time, the top scorers, all played for the Lakers at one point. Yeah, you could say, oh, Karl Malone was at the end of his career. Yeah, he still played for the Lakers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played for the Lakers. Kobe Bryant played for the Lakers. LeBron James played for the Lakers. So no sympathy here whatsoever. And I think, like, I'm not saying that in a mean way. I'm just saying, like, Lakers, you've had so much good luck in the last 20 years. I understand the 7 years have been difficult, but look at how happy you've been before those 7 years ended. Before these 7 years, like, seriously. So that's just how I see it, at least in that circumstance. But with that, I think one more thing before we end it. That OKC versus Portland Trailblazers game was truly a sight to behold, as Damian Lillard scores 51 points against the Thunder, but it wasn't enough as the Thunder survive in overtime, 129 to 121. And Westbrook and George both had over 30 points. George still fighting for an MVP stat, but 51 points for Lillard, 25 for CJ McCollum. And to this, I say Damian Lillard is one of the most underrated players I've ever seen in basketball. He has all the talent in the world to me. He has so much ability and he has so much promise. And he plays at an all-star level constantly. But there's so many other players in so many bigger markets than Portland that are doing so well that he's looked underneath them. Like, I just think if he was in a better market, like if he was in LA or I don't know, you can even say Dallas or like New York, he would be looked at as highly, not as low as he is now. Because honestly, I would put him in my top 10 of best players right now in the NBA. You can disagree, but I would put him as in my top 10. And with that being said, I just think with his 51 points, he deserves all the credit in the world for helping where his team is now. If Lillard's not on that team, the Portland Trail Blazers aren't what they are now. They're not in the playoffs. So, with that being said, I think that's it for the day. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. When we come back, we'll have where Antonio Brown will know where his team is now. We'll know where that happens, hopefully. And Wednesday is the time for the free agency and all that good stuff to begin in the NFL. So, we'll have tons of stuff to talk about next week. And as always, I'm Jeff Balanoff, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.